Elena, I think we have to mention here that the car industry globally has been quite hard hit by the pandemic due to the supply constraints that it had to face because of the lockdowns and, well, other constraints as well.
Yes, Georgi, you're totally right. By the way, just before coming to the studio, I read one global news on that, especially on trends of car sales globally. And of course, our viewers and followers can read it on bm.g in English. The COVID-19 pandemic was a global disruption across trade, finance, health and education systems, businesses and societies like few others in the past 100 years indeed. If we look at findings of numerous studies conducted by EY, McKinsey, Deloitte and others globally, we can draw some very distinct conclusions. Georgi, let me highlight some with a focus on global supply chains. This is because still from outlook to outlook, the fact that global supply chains are disrupted plays a role not only on inflation and economic growth, but also in determining future already post-pandemic policies. The first risk we heard after the COVID-19 breakout was that it would pose significant challenges for supply chains globally. To this day, multiple national lockdowns continue to slow or even temporarily stop the flow of raw materials and finished goods, disrupting manufacturing as a result. But how does that affect specifically Georgia, and whether or not its impact is a bit exaggerated, not only locally but globally as well? First, we asked Asian Development Bank in May 2021.
You may remember at the outset of the crisis, there were concerns worldwide that this could have a very sweeping effect on food supply, disrupting food supply for many countries. That didn't turn out to be the case, certainly not to the extent that was feared, and certainly was not the case for Georgia.
Despite this, ADB strongly advises Georgia to develop its agriculture sector, the sector that in Georgia is definitely the one with one of the highest subsidies support from the state budget in different forms and through different tools and facilities.
However, there is always the threat of other countries' policies, for example, restricting exports, which could have an impact on countries like Georgia going forward. So this is the point that we were trying to flag, and we think that the pandemic situation, it exposed more generally risks, a set of risks around over-reliance on certain sectors. We've talked a lot about tourism, for example, and I would return again to the agriculture sector as being a very good example of a sector that could be developed to bring more resilience.
Yes, the pandemic has not necessarily created any new challenges for supply chains. In some areas, it just brought to light previously unseen problems like the lack of diversification of the economy. So then we asked European Bank for Reconstruction and Development in July 2021 to give us specific examples of how disruptions work to this day.
For example, there are significant shortages of production of chips in global terms, and producers of high-tech products, cars, they already have problems, and they postpone their production because of these shortages. Also, there is significant increase of prices of global shipping tariffs. They increased several times compared with the previous year, and obviously now there is bigger demand. There are some bottlenecks in these supply chains, and all this contributes to higher prices, but also to less supply.
Yes, from product shortages to capacity constraints in the cargo sector, the coronavirus pandemic has impacted supply chains continuously, if inconsistently. As COVID-19 continues to deadlock the global economy, some companies have indicated that they hesitate to invest in additional capacity, which could ease some of the supply chain tensions because they are unsure how long robust demand will continue. Because of this hesitancy and because the path of the virus remains unclear, it is likely that supply chain disruptions will stay with us for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, this is seriously affecting inflation globally, and for the middle to low-income countries like Georgia, impact is negative. Here is more analysis from the closed meeting where National Bank of Georgia and World Bank were in the main focus. My question concerns supply chain disruptions, because we hear this argument from outlook to outlook. From this standpoint, and this question goes both to the World Bank and also to Mr. Governor here. From this standpoint, would you say that it was this threat was a little bit exaggerated?
To our opinion, to our assessment, supply disruptions have had a really big impact on the situation, and in this case on inflation as well. Curfew time, yeah, I mean, the people cannot operate, as they cannot work after 9 o'clock, for example, as it was a case in Georgia. But at the same time, some products need to be delivered in goods and in markets, for example, and there should be people who need to be working in those markets, right? So, but someone needs to pay for these additional expenditures. So, I mean, all this kind of this anecdotal evidence, right? But these are all the things which are then contributing to reflecting this into prices, and then prices are increasing.
There is no question. We saw supply chains came under pressure, especially in the context of certain goods and certain sectors. There were different reasons for that. The Honorable Governor mentioned that you had basically lockdown measures that resulted in production disruptions, and that led to disruptions in the context of global supply chains, as well as, of course, domestic supply chains. We saw that, of course, the incident in Suez Canal led to, additional complexities, and those complexities, in some cases, are still with us. Nowadays, of course, we are worried about supply disruptions in the context of vaccines. We think that there is ample vaccine available, especially in advanced economies. They can do more in terms of donating these to emerging developed economies. But donating is one thing. You need to take the vaccines to these economies and distribute within the country. In some countries, distribution systems are available. In some other countries, unfortunately, they are underdeveloped. Those types of distribution systems are not available. The bank has been very active, especially in the context of low-income countries, providing financial, operational, and analytical support to improve the distribution of vaccines.
Overall, we can say that COVID-19 still has accelerated and magnified problems that already existed in the supply chain. EBRD tells Georgia this could much be an opportunity and not only a challenge for Georgia.
There are opportunities, especially after the pandemic. We see that the European Union is now talking and starting to do something in moving the global supply chains closer to Europe. This could be a chance, not just for Georgia, but for many countries in the EU neighborhood. And to achieve, to benefit from this, obviously, many things should be done, but this should be very high on the radar, and this is something that could be a great opportunity for Georgia to increase its exports, to reduce external deficits, and not to be so reliant on external finance.
One thing is clear, when the COVID-19 subsides, the world is going to look noticeably different. The challenge for companies then will be to make their supply chains more resilient without weakening their competitiveness. To meet that challenge, managers should first understand their vulnerabilities and then consider a number of steps, some of which they should have taken long before the pandemic struck. I think countries should do the same.